What we're going to talk about today, this is kind of a slightly different session to what we usually do in these webinars. So we're going to talk about some highlights in two of the recent Koha versions and also some tips that we have for what you could do to showcase the catalogue that you've got. So the tips you can do in Koha yourself to drive more people and more use of your Koha. So let's start off with an introduction. So who am I? My name is Alex Buckley, and I am a developer in our team Rōpū kohinga at Catalyst, and I have been working at Catalyst since 2016. I started as an intern back in 2016, and I'm now a senior developer. I work remotely, and I'm based in Nelson at the top of the South Island of New Zealand. And the specialties, I do a wide range of different things. My specialties in data migrations and new implementations of different catalog software that we support. So that would be things like Koha, Viewfind, and DSpace. I also work on integrations between third-party systems and platforms with Koha and Viewfind and DSpace. I also really enjoy the interaction with our users and with librarians. So I really enjoy consulting and doing training and things like marketing and just hearing from the end user how they use Koha and what they'd like to do with Koha, but also Viewfind and DSpace. So like I mentioned, this webinar is a little bit different to the format of our usual ones. So we're going to talk about, to give you some context, collaboration and development, and also what to expect when you do a major Koha upgrade. So what happens at an upgrade, why it's a good idea to do an upgrade, things like that, to give you the background context. Then we've picked out 5 highlights from both, across both 2405 and 2411, the 2 most recent Koha versions, and we're going to talk about those. These are things that we think are going to be of a lot of interest to libraries. And then we're going to get into 5 tips that we have that you could try to customize your OPAC, your Koha OPAC, to highlight your catalogue. And then we'll have a chance for Q&A at the end. So let's get started. When we talk about, so Koha is an open source project and it's supported by a community of people all around the world that includes developers, librarians, and volunteers. And so there's a whole community that's maintaining and developing Koha. And Koha has different releases. And so we talk about, when we are talking with librarians, we talk about major Koha releases and minor Koha releases. So as we say, as noted on the slide here, a major release happens every 6 months. This is when these are considered bigger releases. So they have fixes for bugs, for any software bugs and for security bugs, but then they also contain most of the new features and enhancements. So usually you would expect most new functionality, new features that you can use in your library to come in a major release. We also have minor releases. So these are small releases to existing Koha versions, and they typically contain little to no new functionality, but they do contain important bug and security fixes to keep Koha instances using existing versions secure and bug-free, reduce the number of, just keep everything running smoothly and securely. So if we have a look in, what is the context, what's more context about the difference between minor and major upgrades? Well, for us at Catalyst and for the partner libraries that we work with, we take care of all of the work around the minor point upgrades. So a reminder, those minor points are the ones that are typically bug and security fixes, and they come out every month. So we take care of the whole process of, for our partner libraries, of getting those minor upgrades deployed to the sites for our partner libraries. Whereas a major upgrade, that is an opportunity for our partner libraries to test out new features. So there's involvement from the partner libraries in that, because if you have a test site, we would upgrade the test site, and then we would ask you to test it and have a look at the new features and test that all your critical and your important library workflows are working as you'd expect. And then we would coordinate with you to schedule in us upgrading your production site with the upgrade, with the major upgrade. So as I mentioned before, the Koha community releases a major upgrade every 6 months. Most libraries, however, do their major upgrade once a year so that it fits in best with their schedule. And so that's typically what we do. And we're always very happy to talk with libraries about an upgrade approach that works best for them. So we're always really happy to hear from libraries, to hear what's their preferred deploy time of the year, or what sort of approach they'd like to take for testing the upgrade, the major upgrade, or how they'd like to handle that. Another thing that's important that I think is important to keep everyone informed about is why a major upgrade is important. So it's not just for accessing fancy new features and enhancements, it's actually to keep everything running smoothly. So we like to think of it kind of like a warrant of fitness on your car. So doing a major Koha upgrade once a year is essentially going to keep things running smoothly. It ensures you receive fixes for things and also performance improvements. You'll also get security fixes, efficiency fixes, because as well as new workflows, existing workflows can be improved. So with these major upgrades, you get new features, but you also get enhancements to existing features, which can, for example, make them more efficient, accessible, and it's also good for compatibility with other systems. So it's a really good idea to think of a major upgrade kind of like a warrant of fitness on your car. So what are some of the expectations in a major Koha upgrade? What should you expect to happen? Well, for our partner libraries, what we do is before the upgrade itself, we would contact them to agree a time for us to undertake the work. While the upgrade takes place, Koha won't be usable. So what we'd do is a scheduled outage of Koha. The scheduled outage could be up to 2 hours. Usually it's less than that, but we like to give a window of up to 2 hours just to be safe. Then once the upgrade has happened on your production site, once that scheduled outage is done, you'll notice that Koha looks pretty well the same. There might be a few layout changes, but it's important to know that the Koha community has essentially a principle of turning off new features, and new features or major changes go and turned off. And if you want to use them, you have to actually explicitly enable them. So that means things aren't going to usually look radically different, because most things go and turned off, new functionality, and if you want to use them, you need to actually enable it and then you can use it. So that hopefully allays fears about if things are going to look wildly different, because the Koha community has the principle of least surprises in this kind of upgrade context. So don't radically change things. Let libraries choose if they want the new functionality or not, but it's off by default. So what are our top 5 highlights from across Koha 24.11 and 24.05? So something, if you're not familiar with the version numbering, so 24.11 and 24.05 are versions of Koha. They're the version numbers. And the way the version numbers work for Koha is the first 2 numbers are the year, so 24 is last year, 2024, and the second 2 numbers after the full stop are the month that the major release happens. So 11 is November, and 24.05 means that release happened in May last year. So Koha does 2 releases every year. One of them is .11 because it comes out in November, and one of them is .05 because it comes out in May. So you can expect for this year, for example, there'll be a 2505, so May of this year, and a 2511, November this year. So you can always expect those 2 numbering patterns to happen repeatedly for the 6 monthly upgrades each year. These are the 2 versions, and just some stats around what's in them. So as you can see, 2411 had 10 new features, 184 enhancements, and 647 bug and security fixes. So quite a lot in there. And then 2405, 9 new features, 239 enhancements, and 529 bug and security fixes. We've also linked on the slide, and I will be sending out these slides out after to everyone. We've got linked in here blog posts detailing in more depth both. You can see that we've got a blog post that we have written at Catalyst on some of our highlights in more detail across 2411 and 2405. And then we've also got release notes for both, and those detail all the changes across both those 2 releases. So if you want to dive in more into what did those releases include, those will be really helpful resources to take a look at. So let's get started on these top 5 highlights that we've seen across the 2 versions. So I've noted up here, we've got 2411, so that is the release that this functionality came in. So if you upgrade to 2411, you'll receive this new feature, or when you upgrade to 2411, you'll receive it. And it's essentially a new feature in the acquisitions module of Koha. So with Koha, there's an acquisitions module where if you acquire new books, you can use this new feature to save yourself time. So as we've noted on the slide here, this will be useful for you if you upload MARC files to your Koha instance. So some libraries upload MARC files regularly. If that's the case for your library, this feature might be helpful for you. You can configure most of the feature yourself. One thing you would need to do is contact your Koha support vendor to schedule something called a cron job, which is just a script that will need to run on a regular basis on your server. That's something that has to be done on the server, so either by your Koha support vendor, like Catalyst, or someone that has access to your Koha server will need to be able to do that task. So what are the steps for this feature and how does it work? Well, first thing we need to do, as I mentioned earlier, most of the time with a major release of Koha, when you upgrade, things need to be actually explicitly enabled for you to use them. This is an example. This new feature requires you to enable the MARC ordering automation system preference. By default, it's set to disable. So in the screenshot here, we've enabled it. Without actually coming and enabling it, you can't use this new feature and you won't see, you won't be able to use it or see it. So that's the first step, coming in and enabling the system preference. And for those of you that aren't familiar with system preferences, within Koha, on the home page, if you click on Koha administration, that takes you to a page where you can start to search for system preferences. In Koha, system preferences are essentially settings that can be controlled by librarians. It's accessible for you to enable and disable or configure things. There's over 1,000 system preferences within Koha, and the reason for that is the community is always really keen to add configurability and to make things granular, that libraries can choose to configure Koha to work best for their situation. So some libraries will have some functionality turned on or some features turned on, and others will have it turned off. The Koha community doesn't want to just treat everyone the same. They want to enable libraries to use Koha the best way for the library. Once we've enabled that system preference, we need to define some mapping, so actually set some values for other system preferences. So we've got two other preferences, and they are MARC fields to order and MARC item fields to order. So for these ones, we need to define, there's actually some quite good examples underneath these mapping fields. So what we need to do is put a value, for example, price. So that is a field, and then we need to define what MARC field, what MARC subfield are we going to fetch the price data from. So basically think of it this way. You're uploading a MARC file to your Koha instance. These settings, these system preferences are saying to Koha, look for a specific subfield in the MARC file that's uploaded and store it as a particular value within Koha. So in this first example, we've got price, and then we've got colon, and then we've got $975 What that means is when we upload a MARC file to Koha, Koha is going to look, is there a 975p subfield in the MARC file? If there is, it's going to store that as the price data. Because what we're doing with this whole feature, this new feature, is we're going to be able to create new acquisition baskets and orders from the MARC files that we upload. So we have to tell Koha, for this specific MARC subfield, create an order and set the price of that order to whatever's in the 975p subfield. So it gives examples below these two system preferences for what fields you might want to use for price, quantity, budget code, and so on. So you add the different settings that you want in here, and you save that. And then what we want to do is we want to create a new, what's called MARC order account. So that's in the administration module, and it's under acquisition parameters. And there's a new page, so you'll see a link that says MARC order accounts. And this is what the page looks like. And what we've got is this screenshot here has some annotations, but the first annotation is around you need to choose a vendor within Koha. So to use this feature, if you haven't used the acquisition module before within Koha, you'd want to create a vendor and a fund. If you've already got those set up, then the vendor and fund drop-down at the top of this form will have options in it that you can select. The second point is you have to define the download directory. So this is where are MARC files, when you upload them to Koha, where are they stored on the server? Thankfully, this is quite easy to set because it's always the same file path. So we can see in the slide here, the file path is that you'd put right into the input field, into the text field here, var lib Koha, and then instance name. That might be something that you want to ask your Koha support vendor to confirm what the instance name is. Because that's something that's set on the server, and then PMP, and then Koha, that same instance name again, and then upload. So that's saying this is where the MARC files, when you, the librarian, uploads it to the server, this is where they live on the server. And then the third field down the bottom, under check for embedded item record data, we want to say tick yes for that, because we want to, if there are items in the MARC file that you're uploading, we want those items to be included in the acquisition order that Koha is going to automatically create for you. We don't want Koha to ignore item data in the MARC file that you upload. Then we're going to stage a MARC file. So for those of you that have worked with Koha and import MARC records, you'll know about staging records for import. So this is essentially, you navigate to the cataloging module, you click on stage records for import, and then you get a browse button where you can actually choose the MARC file on your computer that you want to upload. You select that. So in this screenshot here, the MARC file I've got is orders_test.marc.xml. So that's the file, and I've clicked upload file. And you don't need to actually do the whole process of staging it. All you want to do is simply upload the file to the server, get it into that download path that we talked about in the previous file, var lib koha. So we're getting the file added to the server, but we're not actually staging and importing it. This step 7 is the step where you want to, you'll need to contact your Koha support vendor because you need them to schedule a script to run on your server. This script is MARC ordering process, and you need to let your Koha support vendor know how often you'd like it to run. So this is going to depend on how often you upload MARC files to your server. So if you're uploading a MARC file every day, then you'll probably want to ask your support vendor to make this MARC ordering process script to run daily. But let's say you only upload files once a week on a Monday. Then if you let your Koha support vendor know that, they can then schedule it to run once a week, potentially on a Tuesday morning, so that it can pick up all the MARC files that you have uploaded to Koha. Or maybe you just upload files occasionally, and so once a month would be sufficient. Once you've uploaded those files to Koha, and once the Koha support vendor has set up the cron job to run, the automated script to run, and you've heard, okay, it has run, then what you can do is navigate to that vendor, to your vendor account page within Koha. So my vendor that I created the MARC order account with was called My Vendor. It's just a test vendor I've created. And we can see highlighted in yellow as a new basket under this vendor. I haven't created the basket. Koha automatically created it using that MARC XML file that I uploaded but didn't stage. So Koha's automatically done this, and we can see it has item count of 8, and it has bibliographic record count of 2, and it has items expected of 8. So Koha's automated creating a basket for me. If I click on this basket, I can see that we've got some records in here with prices. And these prices come from those mappings we set at the start, where we said price :975p. That's telling Koha when we create these items in the basket, we want to set these price fields from specific subfields in the MARC. So that's how this has all been populated from those mappings that you defined, that we defined. So now that these items are listed for our basket, you can click on those items and it's actually been added. There's a bibliographic record and an item record in the Koha catalogue. So you can actually have a look at that. But Koha has essentially automated creating the records, as well as creating a basket in acquisitions module, creating an order in acquisitions module, and then populating all of these different fields for you just because you have uploaded, just from uploading a MARC file. Koha's done all of that other work for you. So it's a good time-saving tip if you use and upload MARC files to your Koha instance. This is the second enhancement of the 5 that we're talking about. This one is to a feature that's been a part of Koha since 2311, and it's about making items bookable. So what does bookable mean? So making an item bookable means that the item can be essentially put aside for a borrower between 2 dates in the future. This differs from a reserve. So when someone places a reserve, they're basically saying, I would like this item from not right now, any time from now, essentially. But when you do a future booking, you're saying, I don't want this item right now. I might want it in 2 weeks, but I'm getting my name on a list so that in 2 weeks, I'll have guaranteed access to this item. So those are the differences between reserves. Reserves start right as soon as you place the reserve, whereas a future booking could be, I want it between 2 weeks and 4 weeks in the future. So we've listed an example on this slide. So a really quite good example is a student, either at a school or tertiary institution. They need an item between the 18th and the 31st of April. They don't need it today. So let's say today was the 1st of April. They don't need it right now. They only need it between the 18th and the 31st. However, with the future bookings enhancement, you can place a booking for that item between the 18th and the 31st. That means that the student will be guaranteed to have access to that item between the 18th and the 31st, but they don't need it now. So that's kind of how one example of how you could use future bookings. The problem with the future bookings was that for libraries, first point about it is it's currently only accessible within the staff client, so within the Koha librarian interface. It's not available in the OPAC where the public interact or search. But the problem with it was that up until 2411, you had to, as a librarian, if you wanted to make 10 items bookable, you had to individually edit 10 different times to enable them to be bookable. This enhancement greatly speeds it up. So now what you can do is bulk make lots of different items bookable in a single go. So now what you can do is make entire item types bookable. So these are the steps for doing it. So the first thing you want to do is edit an item type. And to do that, you want to navigate in the Koha staff client, that librarian interface. You want to navigate to administration and then to basic parameters and item types. So that will give you all the list of item types in your Koha instance. And then you want to edit one of them. So the screenshot we've got here is where I'm editing the music item type. So we can see at the top, it says item type MU, and then the description is music. What we have on the page now is, it's quite small to see and it's not really obvious, but we have bookable as a checkbox. So by default, of course, because this is a new enhancement, it's unticked, but what I've done is ticked it. That means that what I'm essentially doing in this whole screenshot is I'm making all music items, any item with the item type of music will now be bookable. So what does that look like to library staff on the staff client? Well, what it means is any record, any title in your catalogue that has a type, that has a music item attached to them. So this one, I could have, say, 5 book items attached and 1 music item attached. Well, now I'm going to see bookings listed down the left-hand side where I can actually go in there, place a booking for a library user, or manage and administer bookings that already exist. So that's a way that you can quickly make lots of items bookable without individually editing hundreds of different items one by one. So that's a good time saver. Another great enhancement in 2411 is the ability for you to see in one page all of the bookings that are awaiting pickup by library users. So now on the circulation page within the staff client, there's a new bookings to collect page link. If you click on that, you can see listed all the bookings that are waiting to be picked up. It's kind of like a holds awaiting pickup page. It's one place you can come to and see across the entire library everything that's awaiting pickup. So this enhancement, the task management system enhancement, so a bit of background context about this. In Koha 2405, the Koha community added what we consider the beginnings of a task management system to Koha. So the feature was named Catalogue Concerns, but that name is a bit misleading for what it could actually be used for. So essentially what you can use it for is creating tasks and assigning them to colleagues. So that would be other Koha admin users, so other library staff that can log into the Koha staff client. So that was added in 2405 and it's since been enhanced in 2411, and that's what I'm going to talk about, the enhancements. So as with all of these new features, this whole system is turned off by default. If you want to enable it, you need to enable Catalogue Concerns to be able to use it in the staff client, and OPAC Catalogue Concerns to be able to use it in the OPAC. So what it enables you to do, when you've got those two system preferences enabled, you would see, when viewing a record, a report a concern link. So here's a record I'm viewing in the OPAC, and we can see highlighted in yellow on the right-hand side, we've got a link that says report a concern. The reason it's showing on the OPAC is because I enabled that OPAC Catalogue Concern System preference. So that means anyone that's logged in, whether you're staff or just a library user, can click on this and can actually submit a concern. So the sort of things might be the publication date of this record is incorrect. Could you please have a look at this? It might be something like that. So that's how the initial beginnings of this feature were added. It was a way for users and staff to report there's a problem with a particular record in the catalogue. However, after a user has submitted a concern, the next steps for you as the librarian will be on the Koha staff client. You will see at the bottom of the page a little notification, essentially, a little link. So this link, as we can see in the screenshot here, is saying Catalogue Concerns Pending 1. That means someone has submitted a concern, a task, and it's ready to be addressed. It's ready for someone to have a look at it. If you click on that link, you load the page where you can actually manage these tasks, these concerns. What's new in 2411 that wasn't there in 2405 is you can actually assign tasks to a colleague. So someone's, in this example here, someone submitted a concern and they've said, this record has the wrong title. What I'm able to do now is ask my colleague, Mary, could you please investigate if this record has the wrong title? I can actually change the assignee, so I can search for and select Mary, who has access to log into the Koha staff client. I can also click Notify Reporter and they will receive an email when I hit update. What's really good about this is previously you were not able to notify a colleague when you've assigned them a task to look at. So they would have to keep looking at the catalogue concern page, refreshing it regularly in order to see, has someone assigned me a job? Has someone assigned me a task? Now they don't need to because they're going to be emailed. So yes, you could use this just to report problems with a record, but there's much wider use cases and ways that you could use this feature. So here's an example. If you've got new cataloguing staff joining your library and you'd like to do some upskilling of them, one idea that we had for how you could do this is you as a cataloguing librarian or as a established library staff user, create a blank, you catalogue a blank record in Koha. So you just put in the minimum number of fields, MARC fields that you need to with values, perhaps it's a title and an item type, something like that. And then you click on that report a problem or report a concern button. And then you write a message, you submit something that says, I would like you to add values into all of these other MARC fields and subfields. So you're basically creating a task for those new catalogers to go away and do, where you've listed, I'd like you to fill in these 10 other MARC fields. Once you've submitted that, you can then go, you can see on the Koha staff client homepage that little link that we saw back a few slides here, catalog concerns pending. Click on that, you assign the task to one of the new cataloging staff members that's joined, and you click to notify reporter, because you want them to actually be notified that a task has been assigned to them. They'll receive an email, and then they can work through all of those steps that you've asked them to do to flesh out that MARC record, adding values to all the fields that you've asked them to look at. And then once they've completed all the tasks, they can then assign that task back to you. They can assign it back to you for review. So this is a way that you can create something, a training opportunity, a training exercise, list at high level what you'd like the new staff to do. They go away and do it and assign it back to you to review. So it's a really good upskilling opportunity for new staff at the library. And there's many more ways that this can be used as regards triaging work amongst library staff, but also as a training tool. So we're really excited to see how libraries start to use this new feature, especially as it continues to be enhanced by the community. This new feature is quite a small feature, but it can be really helpful for users. So previously, library users could only reserve one specific item attached to a record at a time. So why was this and how did it look? Well, radio buttons were listed beside every item when you wanted to place a reserve. So if we look at it, we can see here on the screenshot the previous behavior before Koha 2405. We had circular radio buttons. This means I can only tick one of these three items and actually place a reserve on that specific item. If I try and click on one of these other circles, the first one unselects. That's how radio buttons work. You can only have one selected at a time. However, now what you can do is enable the display multi-item hold system preference, and that will enable both OPAC users and staff client users to select multiple items that they want to place a reserve on. So now the behavior is what we see, rather than those circular radio buttons, we've got square checkboxes, of which I can have 2 selected, as you can see here. So I don't want the next available item. I have 2 specific items that I want. The first one and the third one. I'm not interested in the second item. Why would this be useful? Well, very useful for periodical and subscription or serial records. So for example, you might have a user, a library user, or you yourself might be after the Time magazine and you want to place a specific reserve on the January and March 2024 issues of the magazine. You don't want any random issue, and you also don't just want the January, you want March as well. With this system preference enabled, you could tick for January 2024 and you could tick for March 2024. So you've got 2 specific items that you've placed a reserve on, which is only possible because of this new system preference. So that's a really useful feature for both the OPAC and the staff client. This enhancement, also added in 2405, is improving the Koha SQL reports. So lots of libraries use SQL reports, and with Koha, any data that's in the Koha database, you can fetch out of the database using reports. The Koha community, this is really useful for reporting, for things like how's the library being used, for things like seeing what are the statistics for how many issues are happening, or returns or reserves. So looking at how the library is being used and what's in your catalogue. So I've just got a basic report here, which is select items by holding branch. So at the moment we have I've added a drop-down box to my SQL report. This functionality of being able to add a drop-down box pre-populated with different values has been possible for some time in Koha. But these 2 enhancements, which we've linked up the top here, basically enable you to do much more. So this report is enabling me to select a holding branch. So select one of the branches that's in my Koha instance, and then I can fetch all of the items that are currently sitting at that branch. So in this case, I'd be able to retrieve all of the items currently sitting in the Centreville Library branch. If you haven't used those drop-downs before, what you would see when you create the report, if you just want to use one of these drop-downs, is you see a button that's has the name of insert runtime parameter. And here we can choose what do we want the drop-down to contain. So this previous drop-down, which had Centreville, these are different library branches. So when I create the report, I would select libraries for it to be my insert runtime parameter, because I want a drop-down of library branches to be displayed when I run the report. These 2 enhancements do 2 things. When you click on the type of value you want in your runtime parameter, a pop-up loads. This is what the pop-up looks like. It's the reason it says libraries, insert library parameter, is because I chose to have a drop-down box with libraries as the values. What's new though is 2 new radio button options at the bottom. So one of them is include option for all. So now if I select that, I can have in my drop-down box all as an option. That means if I have 10 library branches and I want all of the different values, so I basically want to see what's in every library branch, and I have 10 branches. Before I would have had to run my report 10 times. Now with this all option, I can run it once. So what the drop-down would look like is the first value is all, and then every other value below is the names of my 10 different library branches. So all is a new value that you can add to your drop-down boxes. But there's another value you can do, another thing you can do with these now. You can allow multiple selections when you're adding a runtime parameter. That turns your drop-down box into essentially a list where you can select multiple items. So I want to run this report for 2 of my 10 library branches. With this functionality, with this enhancement, I'm able to select Centreville and Fairview and get all of the data, all of the, in this case, patrons from Centreville and Fairview, but not from Fairfield and Franklin because I've not selected them. So this enables you to select some but not all of your options, library branches. But equally, if we go back a few slides, you can see when you add a runtime parameter, it's not just library branches that can be in your box when you run the report. It might be member categories, it might be item types or debit types or bibliographic frameworks. So there's a lot of different flexibility with these enhancements to enable you to run reports quicker because you're not having to run multiple times. You can just run it once, either using the all option to get all the results or multiple selections to choose several but not every single parameter option. So these are helpful time-saving enhancements for your SQL reports. So those are the 5 enhancements across 2411 and 2405. And then the next thing we wanted to talk about was Catalogue customization tips. So how can you drive traffic and engagement to your Koha OPAC and with your Catalogue? So on this slide, you will see once I've sent it out after the session, we've got a customizing your Koha Catalogue 2025 blog post, which is linked from here. And we're just going to talk through some of the options from the blog post and some practices that libraries have shown interest in implementing to try and highlight their catalogue. So a really easy way and a really good way to customize your Koha OPAC. So the OPAC is the public interface that your users interact with, is to use HTML customisations. These are essentially different parts of usually the Koha OPAC homepage, so the landing page of your Koha catalogue. This diagram shows in green different areas with the names of the HTML customization. So for example, on the left-hand side, we have OPAC nav. So that means if you want to add content or wording or images or whatever about your library onto your Koha OPAC homepage, and you want it to display in this area on the left-hand side, you would add an HTML customization to the OPAC nav area. So these names basically pertain to different parts of the OPAC homepage to which you can add content. How do you use these? How do you actually add content to those different areas? Well, the first thing to note is that no technical experience of coding is required to add content to those different regions. You can add and edit completely without knowing code. But how do you actually do it? Well, the feature HTML customisations is edited and managed on the Koha staff client, and it's under the tools module, and you'll see it under additional tools on the right hand side. So we've got highlighted in yellow here, HTML customisations. What's important to know is even if a library staff member has access to log into the Koha staff client, they do need to have an additional permission enabled to see this HTML customization link. That permission is the edit additional contents permission. Without that enabled, they will not see this link. So that's important to bear in mind. But once you click on the link, you'll see a page of all the different HTML customizations that are in your Koha instance. And you can choose to add more HTML customizations or edit existing ones. So here is what you get. So what this page here is adding a new HTML customization. And what we've got is there's different parts of this form, and I'll talk you through them. So display location, that is a drop down, and this pertains to what region of the page do you want to edit, or do you want to add content to? So display location in my screenshot here is set to OPAC header. If we go back a few slides, OPAC header is this topmost green box. So it's going to appear at the top of the page. If you add content to it, it will appear at the very top of the page below the Koha logo. Library. So this is what library do you want this content displayed for? So at the moment I've got it set to all libraries, but if you want different content to display on different, on the OPAC, when users from different libraries are logged in, you can choose a library from that drop-down. Publication date is really important. If you want something to display now, you need to set today's date and publication date. Otherwise, it won't display. You can also set an expiration date for it to be automatically hidden. And if you've got multiple different areas of content for the same region, so let's say I have two headers that I want one displayed above the other, you can actually say what order to display them in and appear in position. So I could say the first header I want is position 1, and then the second header I want is position 2. So Koha knows how to stack them on the page. And then we've got the actual editor itself where we add the content. We can see here under content, we've got what's called a WYSIWYG editor. So WYSIWYG stands for what you see is what you get. So this is an editor that will be familiar to quite a few people because it enables you to add content, like you might have seen something similar to this when editing a text document or a Word document or something like that. So you've got your normal file, edit, view, insert, tools, table, and so on. And it enables you to add things to the page, add things to your OPAC header without having to write code. So you can add things like tables, images, links, formatting, without needing to know any code. However, if you do want to add code, you can also do that. And the way you can do that is using, or if you have a bit of code you'd like to add, there's something, this lesser than, greater than button on the third row of the editor on the right-hand side. That is a source code editor. So if you have HTML, you can click on that. It will load a pop-up where you can paste your HTML in and save it. But if you don't want to use HTML by default with this WYSIWYG editor, you don't need to. So what we're going to do now is talk through 5 different ways that you can use these HTML customizations to highlight different things in your catalog. So first up, what you can do is store information in the OPAC header. So in this example, We've got the OPAC header from that diagram. So remember, that's the topmost content editable region that you can play around with. It's displayed at the top of the page, and we've got an example here from Horowhenua Library. And what they've got is, if we compare the diagram versus what Horowhenua has, so Horowhenua's one is stretching across the slide here. We've got the Koha logo at the top, which appears also on the diagram. Under the Koha logo, they have added Libraries Horowhenua logo. And then on the right-hand side, they have a drop-down for ebooks, a link to online resources, and a link to branches and hours. This is all information that they have added to their OPAC header. So you can make things visible in the header. So it's basically the first thing people see when they go to your Koha catalogue. They'll see the header and they'll see, okay, here's links to different resources or different sets of information that you want to make really obvious to your users. When they hit the OPAC, that's what they'll see first. Equally, there's another thing you can do, which Horowhenua Libraries has also done, which is they have edited the OPAC credits HTML customization. So that's at the bottom of the page, and they have added the branch opening hours to that. So we can see here we've got 3 columns, Levin, Shannon, and Foxton, and we've got the library hours for every day of the week and the contact details, so phone, email, and location. And email and location are links, and so you can store information that's useful to your users in the header or in the footer, and that's a really easy way to convey that information to your users in quite a nice visual way. Next, we're going to talk about, with some actual examples, like a live example to show how you can use these HTML customizations. So the next thing we've got are second tips. Our first tip was add information to your OPAC header and footer. Secondly, if your library groups together themed or topicked records of different topics into public lists. So in Koha, it's possible for librarians and for users to create public lists. So we've got examples here of what you could create as lists. So let's say right now we're coming up towards Easter and Anzac Day. What you might do is search your catalogue and group together resources to do with Easter and resources to do with the Anzacs in World War I and II, and put them into a public list. That means if someone's interested in Easter or Anzacs, they can go to this one page and it's collated all of these related records together, so they can see in one page anything that they want to know about Anzacs, all the library's collection related to Anzacs. Similarly, you've got, for example, New Zealand collections. So things like New Zealand authors, you might put all of them together in a list. So you can create these public lists, and that's helpful, but what we want to do is make it really accessible and visible to users so they actually use it. Otherwise, the librarians are spending all of this time compiling and updating and keeping updated these lists, but it's not actually being seen by people. Out of the box in Koha, lists aren't very obvious. So if we look at the screenshot of the Catalyst Koha demo site, what you have is at the top of the page, you've got lists, which is a drop-down. And if you click on this drop-down, we can see all of the public lists. So we've got 2 lists in the screenshot, new arrivals and view all. Problem is, unless I click on this lists link at the top, I'm going to completely miss that as a library user. What can we do to improve this, to make it more obvious, and also obvious in a visual way? Well, what we can do is, I'm going to go for an example of what you can do to make this obvious. So this is what the OPAC looks like before. We're going to do a before and after here. So this is what it looks like before. And this is what it looks like after. So what I've done, rather than just having the lists drop down is still there, that doesn't disappear. But what I'm doing is making really obvious when our library users get to the OPAC, they're going to see March 2024, 2025 lists. First thing they see in a very visual way. So we've got new arrivals with an image, and we've got Easter with an image. And if you click on this, you go to the list. So we're showing in a nice visual way, highlighting these lists. And this is something you can update. So you might say, you might have a display for your March lists, and then in April you make an April list and you change these images and these links. So you constantly, every month, you're highlighting different lists based on different topics in your catalogue or events that are coming up, like Easter, Anzac Day, Matariki, and so on. How do we actually get there? How do we add this? What's the process? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a live demo for how you go about adding this lists display. One thing to add before I do is I've also supplied the source code so that if you want to, you can actually copy it from the slide after this and paste it into your HTML customization. It will give you a base to play around with to get a similar display as this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the window I'm sharing, and we will have a go with this. Hopefully everyone can see we've got the Catalyst demo site open. And what I'm going to just reshare that again. There we go. I'm going to add that content. So I'm on the right-hand side of the page. I've got the Koha staff client, and the left-hand side, I've got the Koha OPAC. On the staff client, I'm going to go to Tools. Then I'm going to, under Additional Tools, I'm going to go down to HTML customisations. As I mentioned, this page shows you all of the customizations, these content areas you've got right now. I'm going to click to new entry and make a new one. And I'm going to call it OPAC main user block. I want it to display to all users of the OPAC, and I'm going to choose a publication date of today because I want it to display once I've saved it. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a title, March 2025, public lists. And what I'm going to do is I am going to click Insert, and I'm going to choose a table, and I'm going to choose, with this feature, I can actually choose I'm going to choose a 2x3 table. So that adds a table, and I haven't had to write any code. I'm now going to click on the table, right click, go to table properties, and I'm going to set a border width of 0, because even though I want a table to display, even though I want a table added to the page, I don't want all the lines of the table displaying. So that's added a borderless table. Now I'm going to highlight the 2 topmost cells of this table, and I'm going to right click, and I'm going to click on Cell Merge Cells. So that means it's going to be a singular cell across the top. Now I'm going to add a heading to my table. So view our March public lists. And I'm going to do a bit of styling of this. I'm going to center align it. I'm going to give it a heading 1. Oh, it's larger, and that has added that. And if I just save that now and come back over to the OPAC, I've got that. View our March public lists. So now I'm going to edit it again, and I'm going to add more. So what I want to do, I want to add some images, and I want to add some links. So first up, I'm going to click on the cell in the second row, insert image, and I'm going to insert an image. For source, this is where do you want to pull the image from? Where in the internet does this image live so that Koha can display it? It's really important that the source is it's a location on a web page, or it's not just locally on your computer. It's not just stored in a file on your computer. It needs to be on the internet so Koha can actually fetch and display it. So we can see that this image is from images.pexels.com. So it's an image that's stored on the internet. And I'm now going to give an alternative description. And this is really important to add because it's what's displayed to users that use a screen reader. And also, if people can't load the image because perhaps they have a poor internet connection, the alternate description is what's displayed. So it is useful and important to add a description of what the image shows. So I'm going to add that. And I'm also going to choose a width, specify a width of 183 and a height of 275 and save, and that's added my image. Then I'm going to go to the second cell and add another image for that. And here I'm going to add the image, an alternate description, and then a width to this. Just to tweak that, the insert image. What's possible also is you can actually drag these across. So I've just accidentally added it to the wrong column, but you can drag across. What I'm going to do now is center align these by clicking on them and then clicking center align. And then I'm going to add 2 links below the images. So that's just insert and then link. And then I'm going to actually paste the link in for those lists in Koha. So this URL here is a Koha link, and that will take the user, when they click on the link, to the list page in the OPAC. So I'm going to text to display is what word is going to be displayed to the user. But rather than displaying a great long ugly link, you can actually display words. I'm going to do new arrivals. And I'm going to just improve the formatting of that by center aligning that, making it a heading 3. And then I'm going to do the same for my Easter 2025 list. So again, I'm putting the Koha list URL in. I'm going to display the text of Easter 2025. Save that. Center align it. and make it a heading 3. And now I'm going to save this. So I've saved my HTML. And then we have the list displaying my little visual display of lists showing. So when the user first goes to the OPAC, they're going to see, okay, there's a new arrivals list and an Easter 2025 list. And if I click on, say, for example, Easter 2025, I go to that list page. So that's a way that you can highlight your lists quite nicely. And I had a really good example here to show you. So if we just go back to the slides. Just grab just get the correct slide. Just have to jump through them. Apologies for that. Here we are. So this is a screenshot of the Chartered Accountants OPAC, a screenshot from their OPAC. And we can see that they have done a visual display for their different lists as well. So we can see under the reading lists heading, I've got 4 boxes, and those boxes contain images and text. And these are different reading lists that they've created in Koha that they're highlighting in a visual way. So we've got Australian tax, New Zealand tax, magazines, women's personal and career development. So that's kind of an example, a more sophisticated example of what we've just had a quick play around with, which is adding a HTML customization, adding a table, and adding a few images and a few links to essentially highlight parts of the OPAC that otherwise people would easily miss. Another thing that can be quite nice is another tip that we've got is to do a visual display of different library resources. So lots of libraries pay for subscriptions to external databases or to other resources. And it can be nice to visually bring those to life as well to try and drive more users for using them. So it's quite easy with Koha just to have a set of bullet point links. So in the screenshot here, we've got library resources, and then we've got below that online database A, legal database, Koha how-to, but we can actually improve this quite a lot. So it's not just a bullet point list, but it's actually visually appealing and therefore more likely to attract users to click on it. We can actually add a nice display similar to what we did with the lists, where we've got different icons or images alongside a link. And this is another thing that we can do with HTML customisations. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate this one to you as well. All right, so here is our OPAC again. And if I zoom in on the left-hand side under library resources, we've got our 3 bullet point lists, 3 bullet point links rather, online database A, legal database, Koha how-to. We're going to improve that display. So what I'm going to do first is hide our March public lists display so that we've got a bit more cleaner area to play around with. So to hide an element, we can just choose expiration date and set that to, for example, yesterday. And if we save that, then in the OPAC, it's there now. And if I refresh, it's disappeared. So that's how you can hide existing content. But what we want to do is improve this display on the left of library resources. So for that, we're going to go back to our staff client, and we're going to go new entry again. And we're going to create another OPAC main user block display location, because we want it in the center of the OPAC homepage. And we're going to choose a publication date of today, because once I've saved it, I want it to display. And I'm going to give it a title, helpful library resources, and I'm going to add content. So again, I'm going to insert a table, a 3x3 table, and I'm going to right click and go to table properties and remove the border width. So no lines, no outlines of the table exist. And I'm going to highlight these top 3 cells of my table, right click, go to cells, merge cells, and I'm going to add a heading into this merged top singular cell. And I'm going to call that helpful library resources. And I'm going to center align that and make it a heading 1 so it's nice and clear to our users. And now what I'm going to do is add into these 3 central cells in my row, I'm going to add an image, and I'm going to add the URL and an alternative description and the sizing that I want, 250 and 250. Oops. And I'm going to do the same in this second field. And these widths, it's worth just having a play around with them. You might need to change those about a bit just to make it the display, get it to look good by changing the widths. And then the third and final image. I'm going to center align all of those by clicking on them and clicking center align at the top. And then I'm going to add some links. So that's quite easy. Insert link. And I'm going to, just as an example, put the URL of Google, just as a quick example. Fix my typo. And I'm going to improve the styling of that, center align it and make it heading 3, and do the same for these other 2 fields. I'm just going to make them have a URL of Google as well, just to make it nice and easy. And then I'll save that. And then going back to my Koha OPAC, refresh the page, and we've got our nice helpful library resources, display of different library resources rather than a more boring kind of plain bullet point list of links on the left-hand side. So we could hide this display on the left-hand side and just have this spanning across from the login on the right across to the left. And it's just a bit more, it's going to attract more users to use your resources because it is nicely and obviously displayed. So that's a nice little thing that you can add with the OPAC customisations editor, which is quite nice to add. So again, I've added the source code here, so you can copy this into an OPAC HTML customization and have a play around with that, and you get essentially the example that I've just created. Another real-life example, again, is the Chartered Accountants site, Chartered Accountants of Australia and New Zealand, where they have created, again, boxes with imagery and links to different resources that they make accessible to their users. So you can click on those, and that's quite nice to see what they've done and what's possible. So another tip that's really helpful is set and forget library news. So as I've talked about, HTML customisations are things that they're different regions within the OPAC homepage, but you can also add news. And you can basically set and forget this news, but in that news feature by choosing a publication date for when you want it to automatically display and expiration date when it should automatically hide. So a nice example of this is if you have an April library competition, you're trying to drive engagement with the library. In this example here, I've just got a little news item, be in to win in April. It's going to automatically display because my publication date is the 1st of April and it's automatically going to hide on the 30th of April. So this means you can actually essentially queue up lots of different news items at the start of the month. And as long as you've set publication and expiration date, Koha will automatically show and hide them as you've set them up. So when you get a bit of free time, you can queue up lots of set and forget library news, and then Koha will take care of the rest. So this is what it would display like. A thing at the top of your OPAC, just below the search box, with the text be in to win in April. So that's kind of a nice little example of set and forget time-saving functionality there. And then finally, what's really good is to communicate with library users in their own language. And so with both the news and the news feature and HTML customisations, you have different language tabs where you can add, if you've got the content, library news or library content in different languages, you can save it in these different languages. So for example, we could have the library content in English as well as Te Reo Māori, and Koha will display it to your users depending on what language they're viewing the Koha OPAC in. The language tabs at the top here, you might be thinking, where do they come from? Is it every language? What they come from is they're the languages that your Koha support vendor has installed on your Koha server. So if you wanted more languages, you'd want to get in contact with your Koha support vendor and request that they install other languages so that you can add content in those other languages. The other point that's important is that Koha doesn't automatically translate. So if I save a news item in English, it's not going to automatically translate it to Te Reo Māori. I, the librarian, would need to go away and get it translated, and then I can save it in Te Reo Māori or whatever language it is. So that's just important context to know about that. This essentially covers what I just mentioned. One other thing that's a nice bonus tip for as far as translating and nice enhancements within Koha is we wrote alongside Education Services Australia, Schools Catalogue Information Service. So the SCIS team at Education Services Australia, we wrote a plugin called the Austlang plugin, which enables you to essentially add content. If you have resources in your library in Indigenous Australian languages, you can now add the language code for that. So we can see here with the plugin installed. So I've given the link for the plugin. But when it's installed, when you're cataloguing a book, when you go to the 041A subfield, which is the language code subfield, we've now got Indigenous Australian languages available thanks to this plugin. So that can be really useful for libraries that hold resources in Indigenous library languages, and you can store that information and that context in your catalogue record. So we have a chance for a few questions if you would like to know anything, and I've also just got listed here other resources that you might like to sign up for, or if you'd like to get in touch. And I'd just like to thank you all very, very much for joining. And I hope it's been useful for you and you've got some tips that you can implement in your Koha sites. And we'd also really love to know what sort of other content would you like in future webinars or blog posts? What other things are you really interested to learn about? We'd love to hear. So if you could put that in chat as well, that would be amazing. But thank you very much.